Thousands of years ago, humans transitioned from being nomadic hunter-gatherers and learned to farm the earth, to grow plants and raise animals. The techniques to grow fish and shellfish have developed along with terrestrial agriculture, and aquaculture has been with us ever since. Today, about half the fish and shellfish we eat come from aquaculture. Capture fisheries alone cannot satisfy the world's growing appetite for nutritious, healthy seafood. Aquaculture is growing rapidly to meet the demand, and with this growth have come concerns about the potential environmental impacts of fish farms. Fortunately, most aquaculture is sustainable and has minimal environmental impacts. Shellfish farming in particular has been shown to have substantial environmental benefits. Shellfish feed by filtering microscopic plants from the water. In doing so, they improve water quality, remove excess nutrients, and provide excellent habitat for other marine organisms. Early oyster culture efforts simply involved spreading shell in shallow waters. This shell would attract larvae and enhance natural populations. Then the shell, with baby oysters attached, would be moved into good growing areas for a few years before harvest. These techniques worked well for generations and are still employed today. In the 1950s, scientists learned how to spawn and rear shellfish larvae, and many shellfish farmers now use shellfish hatcheries to ensure a reliable source of seed. Many different methods have been developed to enhance growth and survival. Hatchery-reared shellfish are grown in bags, cages, and racks, or sometimes planted directly on the bottom. Farmers have developed a wide variety of gear to protect the shellfish from predators such as crabs and starfish. Hatchery-reared oysters developed into uniform single oysters for the lucrative half-shell market. American oyster lovers are enjoying a renaissance of raw bars, which have been springing up all across the country. Shellfish farmers are working hard to meet the demand for these succulent morsels, and oyster farms are appearing up and down the coast. There are now over 300 specialty oysters being cultured for the raw bar market. Especially in New England, production has been increasing at double-digit rates for several years. With this rapid growth in aquaculture, conflicts with boaters, fishermen, and waterfront homeowners are bound to occur. Growers have encountered public opposition to new farms based on environmental concerns and aesthetic impacts. Shellfish farmers are anxious to explain to the public that shellfish aquaculture is an ecologically benign form of farming that is sustainable and provides jobs and economic development in many economically depressed coastal regions. Everyone knows that shellfish are nutritious and delicious, but few understand that there are ecological benefits of shellfish farming. Scientists have shown that shellfish are an essential inhabitant of coastal waters. Their feeding activity actively clears the microscopic plants and sediment from the water. This time-lapse video of oysters in a turbid aquarium demonstrates how a few oysters can clear 30 gallons of water in just a few minutes. An adult oyster will filter about 2 gallons an hour. This allows greater light penetration, which aids in eelgrass and helps oxygenate deeper waters. Shellfish farming also helps remove excess nutrients in coastal areas that are often impacted by coastal development, fertilizer runoff, and sewage treatment plants. Excess nitrogen often leads to phytoplankton blooms, fish kills, and anoxia. Many coastal communities are struggling to find ways to reduce the flow of nutrients into delicate coastal ecosystems. Scientists estimate that oyster farms on the East Coast and Gulf Coast remove more than 800 tons of nitrogen from the coastal marine environment each year. At the same time, 50,000 tons of carbon is sequestered into cultured oyster shell, where it remains locked up for thousands of years. At the same time, shellfish and the structures used to grow them provide valuable habitat for billions of organisms, including juvenile fish and lobsters. Shellfish culture gear can act as an artificial reef. Here we see a lobster that has made a home under a shellfish cage. At certain times of the year, every cage in this farm will harbor several juvenile lobsters. These structures in turn become hosts to abundant fouling organisms and algae, and a multitude of creatures that feed on these, as well as find protection in the nooks and crannies that the gear and the oysters provide. Bottom-planted shellfish provide structure and firm substrate on what is often otherwise a flat, featureless bottom. This attracts and provides a valuable habitat for a host of crabs, worms, and invertebrates that form the base of the complex marine food chain. 15 years ago, a small 2-acre farm in Rhode Island was established on what was once barren bottom. Very little survived in the black mud that dominated the site. It was because there were no shellfish on the site that the farm was allowed to use this spot. The mud was rich with decomposing algae, and there was little oxygen in the bottom water. Aside from the occasional burrow, little lived there at all. Over a period of years, the farmers placed several hundred oyster cages on the site, and quickly the site became home to thousands of baby fish, crabs, and lobsters. Researchers have compared the populations on this site with that on a nearby eelgrass bed and found that the cages supported as much as 10 times the abundance of fish and other organisms as the eelgrass did. The biological communities were different to some degree, but the diversity was similar, and many species were found in abundance at both sites. The 2-acre site seasonally supports almost 1,000 juvenile lobsters and several thousand juvenile tautog, scup, and black sea bass. The farm is also home to millions of other juvenile fish, mud crabs, shrimp, and worms that serve as food for predatory fish such as striped bass and flounder that frequent the site. Further studies have shown that shellfish cages provide an excellent habitat for juvenile scup, tautog, and many other fish. They find abundant food and shelter from numerous predatory fish that are attracted to the abundant prey. Habitat quality in the oyster gear was at least as good as other artificial reefs that were constructed to restore habitat for fish and lobster. Even shellfish free-planted on the bottom provide structure that will attract a variety of organisms that will make the farm their home. The nooks and crannies make great hiding places for juvenile lobsters and crabs, and predators know that these beds are a great place to look for prey. Here we see a small sea bass that has made its home in an empty oyster shell. In Connecticut, the practice of planting oyster seed on the bottom and dredging it up a few years later when the oysters reach market size has been used for over 100 years on thousands of acres of leased ground. Some complain that the practice of dredging kills many animals as the heavy rakes collect the oysters. However, the practice is fiercely defended by the local resource managers who understand that oyster farms enhance local lobster populations. Even if many of these small lobsters are killed by the dredges, many more survive because of the shell planted on the bottom. If the farms were not there to replant the shell every year, the bottom would soon return to the barren mud and baby lobsters would not be able to find refuge from predatory fish. The experience of many coastal communities that now support shellfish aquaculture is that shellfish farms have enhanced the local fish populations. Fishermen have found that the cages and gear attract large predatory fish that come to feed on the juvenile fish that make the cages their home. While local residents are often initially skeptical when they hear about a proposed shellfish farm in their neighborhood, they usually come to recognize that shellfish farmers are good neighbors. The farmers are excellent guardians of water quality because their livelihood depends on clean water. Shellfish need clean water to grow well, and the farmers will often be the first to raise the alarm if water quality is being jeopardized. Coastal resource managers have long recognized the ecological value of eelgrass beds. Eelgrass is known to provide a valuable habitat for juvenile fish, while it removes nitrogen and stabilizes the bottom during storms. For this reason, eelgrass is protected by federal law as essential fish habitat. Millions of dollars have been spent to restore damaged eelgrass beds. Shellfish aquaculture provides similar ecological services and should be considered an important component of fisheries and habitat restoration efforts. Resource managers have long recognized the value of shellfish for maintaining water quality and providing habitat. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent to restore shellfish populations. Private shellfish aquaculture can yield much the same benefits for free if society is willing to allocate some of the public resources to private growers. This is the wave of the future.